to publish those reports, maybe by end of this year. We are still working. The second question to Commissioner, if you have asked as a Nipn people, because right now we are representing Nipn, though I am from UNICEF, my role is also beyond Nipn. But if you are asking this question to Nipn, then Nipn role is mostly to give you the analysis and the result. It's up to those policy and programming people to take that finding and use for their programming. So I would again return that question to you, because it's your role how you want to interpret that analysis and use for your programming and policy purpose. So that's the role of Nipn. But if you are asking me this question as a person who is working in nutrition, anemia is not that easy, sir. And you might be knowing better. It's not only in Uganda, but any parts where I have worked or I have seen the data, anemia is really a puzzle, especially among pregnant women. In many countries where I have seen the IFA, here the coverage of IFA supplementation is quite low in this country. But even those countries where IFA is let's say 70 plus or 80, still anemia has increased. And that's where we need to explore the etiology of anemia, because only 50% of anemia is iron deficiency related. The rest 50% is related to other things, which you may know better, the causes. And we are not addressing those causes. So it's not an easy question, I can't answer that question. Yeah, because I don't have a very specific answer.
Okay, I just wanted to add on that. So basically, both of their questions to me are very related. But I think that's the time when to say that Nipn is in the right place. Because the same questions you're asking are the same questions which are being asked by other people. On one side, we have many people who are working in the research and generating lots of data. They do some level of analysis, but then the analysis, and I'm one of those culprits, the analysis and the results don't reach. I have been, I'm trying to explain myself here. I have been part of that group which does analysis and puts them out there. Whoever wants takes it. If you're not interested, it's your problem, not mine. So that, Nipn wants to change that by saying if there is an analysis that is done anywhere, let's bring it, let's simplify it, let's use it. So whether it's on anemia, whether it's on biofortification, whether it is on industrial fortification of food, let's really get the results out there. So Nipn is a platform for that. The second one is that the Nipn approach is not only saying, well, we are a model, a center where all this information should come and then we disseminate it. The sustainable way of doing it is, let's get some of you people trained so that you can do the simple analysis. But even if you can't do the extensive, difficult analysis, at least we put you in a position where you can be able to understand the results and then interpret the results and then possibly also apply those results. So I think this takes both of them. Yeah. I only had one comment in addition, because you said that obesity is on the increase, overweight is on the increase among women.
Yeah.
We don't have it among men. You said especially the women. We don't see it among men because we don't have the data. But otherwise, I'm not trying to say that I'm a statistic, but many of us men as well, we are not doing well. Thank you, Sumit. I think he deserves a round of applause. And thank you so much also for the audience. I think you also need to clap for yourselves.
Yesterday, we looked at the UNAP. We had the overview of Nipn, then we looked at the UNAP2, the M&E framework and its linkages to Nipn. We did the policy mapping processes. We also looked at the strategic events within our sectors, which Nipn can support, and we also looked at the situation analysis the nutrition situation analysis. Those are the key things that we looked at yesterday, and there was a lot of issues generated from the group discussions. Right now, we want to hear the key learning points, the key issues that emerged for you from yesterday's process.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I think for me, what I learned yesterday was something that was cross-cutting, which was fortification, both biofortification and industrial fortification, as something we should focus on as a project.
I think from yesterday's discussions, especially in my group trade, we kind of noticed there's a lot of cross-cutting relationship between agencies and, like for example, Uganda Board of Standards. We also need to reach out to them for information.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yesterday, I participated with the education department, and we posed the question of folic acid. Then Summit posed one that we are going to pose questions without existing policies, because they say the folic acid is being supplied to adolescent girls, but which policy is there that's going to guide the supply of folic acid? So the question we are going to pose should have a backing of policies already acted or in place.
Yeah, there was a cross-cutting issue around fortification and biofortification. There is a point here to do with them. We need to reach out to National Bureau of Standards to be part of the agencies we relate with when it comes to standards in foods and all that. But there is another thing coming through, folic acid. Do we have a policy on folic acid in the country? And the next issue is raising, if the policy is not there, can we do something on that to influence the policy development? Can Nipn initiate the process and through data or available evidence to influence Ministry of Health to come up with a policy? That's the question at hand.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. I think I'm trying to clarify something here. Uganda does have a policy on IFA supplementation. It's not that we don't have. But that policy is for pregnant women. The iron and folic acid supplementation is for pregnant women. For adolescent nutrition, the WHO guideline says bi-weekly IFA supplementation. WHO says that. But not many countries has adopted that policy into their country's policy to do that. Here in the new MyCan guideline, MOH has prioritized adolescent as one of the priority target group, given now the MOH is going towards the life cycle approach. But then right now, as of now, there is no such policy, or even, let's say, even if policy, let's say, exists in MyCan, it's not started to implement. So if we are not implemented something, how can we have assessing the impact if we have nothing on ground in terms of implementation? So just as a clarification.
So the biggest issue was around assessing the impact. So the question was not valid because of the impact assessment. But if we are to review the guidelines at the Ministry of Health, and we had data, we could influence them to consider, to review the policy and consider the adolescents. Okay?
A brief one on yesterday's formulation of questions. I'm thinking the gist of our retreat here is about formulating the specific and attainable questions based on the guidelines of Nipn. So I think with so many agencies coming together, we should be in the know right now and interacting to know what do they have in terms of Nipn, what Nipn needs to achieve. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay. I think what I needed to do, I needed to do a very small presentation on the standard Nipn questions should look like as we start. And I think I can do this in about 10 minutes to look at how the questions should be, right? Okay.
The women are not given the equal opportunities to farm, to grow, to make decisions on what is sold and what is consumed at home. Then that's an area where I would say, I think here we need much more interventions in terms of community development. But without that, they cannot be able to tell. Secondly, now that goes back to the impact evaluation questions that are being raised in this room. Yes, you can do an impact evaluation in different ways. It could be theoretical, it could be, causal pathway analysis that do not even need a lot of extensive data collection. But you also have, in some cases, natural experiments. For instance, SAGE goes and does a pilot in Arua, but not in Moyo, for instance. And you can be able to tell that, well, from what we are seeing, SAGE is impacting on this outcome, that outcome, and maybe also part of it is nutrition. And then we have data, even if it is secondary data that has been collected over the years, we can be able to see what has been happening in Arua and the time when SAGE came in, what happened, right? The year after, or maybe 2 or 3 years after. But then in other places, like for instance, Rango, SAGE was not there. SAGE is the money they give to old people, let me put it that way. So there you can be able to tell, hey, look here, SAGE causes an impact. We have had these things, I think, being seen in areas where people have received indoor residue spraying. It's very clear, the writing is on the wall. Mosquitoes just die because there is IRS, and as a result of that, malaria cases go down. And if malaria cases go down, the anemia rates go down by more than 25%, okay? They are not eliminated because of several other causes, but at least then you have a reason to say, well, if this is working in this part of the country, why can't we just move it to the rest of the country? So that's, I think, for me, where we need to focus. And that will help our policymakers know exactly what to do. At the moment, even if you look at the UNAP 2, it is not specifying, if you do this, how much do you reduce malnutrition in any form? That's not very clear. It's not highly supported by the evidence that is done, that is based on studies that have been done in Uganda. What we have are feelings, I think malaria is important. If we address malaria, we can bring down anemia, okay? But by how much? How about if we feed people? Can't we also bring down anemia? Maybe by how much? We all don't know, and that's why Nipn is here, and that's the reason why we need to move these things in that sort of like direction.
They want to understand the impact of social protection on nutrition outcomes. What would that mean? Possibly, Nipn working with the Ministry of Gender to set up a system of data collection for them to be able to effectively assess the impact and be able to do that. As gender, as a ministry, but once that data is collected by the ministry itself, we should be able to tap into that data for future questions and future answers. So that we don't throw away all these impact questions, we say, how can we work with you to set the system and you do your own impact assessment? Like, for example, you are talking about social protection approaches. How nutrition sensitive are they? So if we are to start from there and even set the indicators and whatever with you, you can go ahead, implement, and later evaluate, but that's purely the ministry doing that. But as Nipn, we can, at a later stage, assess and access the data and be able to use it.
Thank you so much. I'm from Gender. My name is Francis Katamba. I think in the context of the discussions we had yesterday in our groups, the key word was support. And I think that's what influenced the discussions in all these groups. What support can you give the ministries in mainstreaming nutrition? So that takes us to another key word. There's support, number one. Two is mainstreaming. So as we understand the whole aspect of mainstreaming, what is it that we must do to ensure that all of us across government appreciate that whatever we do anything that we do has in one way or another an element of nutrition. Now, given my background in gender, the reason why, for instance, we raise that matter, we know for sure that all the programs under social protection are basically dealing with inclusiveness. So, there's SAGE, there's the Social Assistance Grant on Empowerment, the older persons we're giving money. And we know, with the little studies we have done, these resources are beginning to indicate some results, especially in regard to improved well-being, which, of course, the assumption holds that they have a bearing on nutrition, because studies have also revealed that most households we have in the country are headed by older persons who are looking after orphans and babies. You get the point. Now the question, of course, that's what exactly motivated our thinking. That now, okay, if we have SAGE, we have YLP, we have WEP, OPM has NOSAF 3, there is the labor intensive public works. All these are huge programs targeting, social protection programs. Are we together? And they are taking substantial amounts of resources. We have even developed the response plan, the refugee livelihood response plan, with the number of entities. Now, all these are going to attract a lot of resources. And I know at the end of the day, if you understand the whole concept of nutrition, you will appreciate that they have a bearing on nutrition. For me, that's how I understand now the mainstreaming. But now, 2 weeks ago, is it 2 weeks or 3? I think a letter came from OPM requiring us to mainstream. Okay? I know my understanding is that we have to mainstream nutrition in the NDP 3, and therefore we have to mainstream nutrition in our social development plans. Now, how are you going to help me identify, to facilitate that mainstreaming? I need some indicators. You see?
That Nipn, as it stands now, by its design, it may not be able to answer all those questions. That's why already from experience, people are already raising questions around how then can we be supported. Now, for example, some policy relevant questions are legitimate and are of high importance to decision makers. But the Nipn approach, as it stands now, may not be able to address them. And here, the point of reference is more to do with questions that relate to causality, impact, and cost efficiency. I think Sumit has endeavored to explain some of these, and that's why we saw impact has come through. Everyone is talking about impact. And for us, we're asking ourselves if the impact questions are the center of interest for government, what do we then do? And that's what we need to take forward as a conversation within Nipn and see how do we deal with that. We may not have the capacity or the data to answer those questions, but is there something Nipn can do within those sectors, maybe to build their capacity to do their own impact assessments, and they avail the data for future use. Now, the greatest principle we are operating on now in Nipn is using existing data, and that's why it's a bit limiting. Maybe as Nipn evolves over time, maybe some of these will get addressed. Now, what would be a legitimate question in Nipn? I want to give some examples here. Questions best suited to the Nipn approach as of now, and questions not suited. Now, these ones, we've been given guidance by the Global Support Facility for this project. And one of them is, for example, questions to describe known determinants of malnutrition. For example, have known determinants of malnutrition evolved in relation to stunting by region? That one is unacceptable. The question is acceptable. But the question on the causes, what are the causes of high levels of stunting in the semi-arid regions of the country? For you to determine the causes I think it's more difficult, and that's why they are saying that may not be a suitable question. Then the other example is on a question to explore linkages of agriculture to nutrition. What are the agriculture or food system related factors associated with nutrition outcomes in Uganda? That would be a question that can be answered, but what may not be answered is what is the impact of agricultural interventions on child stunting. In other words, the data may not be available, and the processes of determining the impact of agricultural interventions on child stunting might be more complex to be done. Then the other example is questions to understand implementation along the impact pathway. Here, what can be acceptable, tracking progress, measuring evolution of nutrition-specific and sensitive interventions coverage, and the other side is, the other side, which is looking at it's also talking about impact. The example on tracking progress and measuring the coverage is are nutrition interventions reaching their targets? That can be acceptable. In terms of reaching population and coverage, how have the nutrition interventions coverage evolved in relation to the determinants? These are some of the questions that could be easily answered through Nipn. Now, I don't want to go through so many questions because we've had this debate within Nipn and in different forums. And what we've had, I think,